Baseball fans tend to remember most the horrible trade that destroyed their franchise, or the fantastic one that built their everlasting dynasty. But what often gets lost in the mix are the hypothetical deals that never actually happened, yet if they had, could have become some of the most iconic swaps in MLB history. These are 10 of the craziest what-if MLB trades, like in 2003, when the Red Sox were literally inches away from getting the generational talent of Alex Rodriguez in exchange for Manny Ramirez, Nomar Garciaparra, and John Lester. At the time, A-Rod was coming off a season where he led the league with 47 home runs, 124 runs scored, and 376 total bases, while still playing elite defense at shortstop. Meanwhile, Manny Ramirez had just hit 325 with 37 bombs and a 587 slugging percentage. Nomar was a 5-time All-Star and the poster boy of the Sox franchise. Then throw in John Lester, a promising young prospect who would eventually go on to win 200 career games and throw a no-hitter, and this was potentially the biggest blockbuster the league had ever seen. It made sense though. The Sox were desperate after so many years of disappointment. Larry Lucchino, the Sox president, even commented, "We wanted to be bold. We wanted to win." So here was a chance after the near misses of 2002 and especially 2003 to give life to that boldness. The deal was as good as done until a massive hitch in the road suddenly appeared. The MLB Players Association was concerned that A-Rod's willingness to take a pay cut for the trade set a dangerous precedent on the league. With the trade paused, negotiations continued. However, Aaron Boone coincidentally busted his knee playing pickup basketball, and the Yankees, who weren't even in the conversation, suddenly swooped in to grab A-Rod. Rodriguez was supposed to anchor a Red Sox dynasty, yet he instead went on to dominate in the very same division for 10 seasons, only in pinstripes. A mega deal like this falling through is crushing to a team, and is very reminiscent of another potential deal in 1992, where Barry Bonds became, at least over the phone, an Atlanta Brave. Fresh off a World Series run and armed with a loaded farm system, Braves GM John Schuerholz struck a deal with the Pirates to acquire Bonds in exchange for closer Alejandro Pena, outfielder Keith Mitchell, and a player to be named later. At the time, Bonds had already won an MVP in 1990, was coming off a season with a 924 OPS, and had put back-to-back 30-plus homer and 100-plus RBI years. Meanwhile, Pena had just posted a 1.40 ERA in 1991, and Mitchell had just batted .318 as a 21-year-old rookie. The trade didn't feel so much insane, just bold. The Braves secured Pena's approval, prepped a press release, and were excited to add Bonds, the game's most complete player, to a core that would soon feature Maddox, Glavine, and Smoltz. However, at the 11th hour, everything came crumbling down. Pittsburgh, for one reason or another, backed out. Some say ownership got cold feet, others blame Jim Leyland's clubhouse loyalty. Whatever the reason, Bonds would go on to chase 762 home runs and a career 444 OBP on the Giants. Only won one title during their 1990s run, a title that may never have even happened if the next trade had occurred.
They welcomed former Chicago Cub Greg Maddux to a formidable pitching rotation that already included Tom Glavine, John Smoltz, and Steve Avery.
Before Glavine, Smoltz, Maddox, and Avery teamed up to create the deadliest pitching rotation in recent memory, Glavine was just an average young prospect that was nearly traded. In the winter of 1990, Glavine had shown flashes of greatness, but was hardly a sure thing. In the previous season, he went 10-12 with a 4.28 ERA and a 94 ERA+, for a Braves team that lost 97 games. So when the Expos dangled Tim Raines, a man who in his early 30s had just posted a 379 OBP with 49 steals, the Braves seriously considered it. Raines was a 7-time All-Star by that point and already had 4 seasons with 70-plus stolen bases, making him one of the most electric leadoff hitters in baseball. The Braves, desperate to spark an anemic offense, nearly pulled the trigger. There was interest, no doubt, one Braves executive later recalled, but something told us we'd regret letting Glavine go before he figured it all out. That executive deserves a promotion, because Glavine went on to win 2 Cy Youngs, 300 games, and the MVP award for a Braves World Series win. Letting go of your greatest pitcher is a surefire way to lose a lot of games. A lesson that the Yankees were extremely close to learning in 1995 when they almost traded away Mariano Rivera.
Mariano Rivera was on the block for Felix Hernandez because
Jeter wasn't
Jeter
ready.
was struggling in spring training in '96. I got cold sweats.
George Steinbrenner could be described in many ways, but patient is not one of them. With rookie shortstop Derek Jeter struggling in spring training, an idea was drafted that the Yankees would trade away Mariano Rivera for Felix Hernandez as a contingency plan if Jeter didn't pan out. At the time, Rivera was young and unproven, and was best known for a few flashes of success in the 1995 postseason. And Hernandez, though not a star, was a veteran infielder with a .259 career average and strong defensive chops. The deal was nearly done, but after a tense 90-minute meeting in Joe Torre's office, Yankees brass convinced the boss to hold off. "You guys better be right," Steinbrenner warned as he backed off. Rivera went on to post a 2.09 ERA and strike out 130 batters in 107.2 innings that season, acting as the bridge to John Wetland in a bullpen that led New York to its first World Series title since 1978. By 1997, Rivera was the closer, and by the time he retired, he held the all-time MLB record with 652 saves, a 1.0 career ERA in the postseason, and an unprecedented 0.70 ERA across 141 playoff innings. As Jeff Nelson put it, if you took Rivera off that team, the odds are a lot less of us winning 4 World Series in those 5 years. Maybe 1, maybe none. Sometimes a team needs to stick with their homegrown stars just a little longer to see them blossom, like the Mets and Wilmer Flores did in 2015.
A nice big hand for Wilmer Flores. Most of these fans know that Wilmer's about to get traded.
On July 29, 2015, Wilmer Flores stood at shortstop, tears rolling down his face, as Citi Field gave him a standing ovation. Word had spread online that he was being traded, along with pitcher Zach Wheeler, to the Brewers for Carlos Gomez. The Mets needed a bat, and Gomez, a former Met turned 2-time All-Star, had just posted a 5.7 WAR season in 2014. Meanwhile, Flores was a 23-year-old infielder with sneaky pop and 6 years in the Mets organization. And Wheeler, though recovering from Tommy John, was a prized young arm with a 3.5 ERA over his first 49 starts. Just as the trade seemed like a done deal, it suddenly unraveled. Mets doctors flagged Gomez's medicals, specifically a hip concern, and GM Sandy Alderson killed the deal post-game. "We aren't going to be able to pass Carlos on the physical," he told Brewers GM Doug Melvin, stunning both clubs. The emotional scene with Flores may not have been the official reason the trade fell apart, but it became the unofficial symbol of the trade that never was. Days later, the Mets instead traded for Yoenis Cespedes, who mashed 17 homers in 57 games and catapulted them to the World Series. Oddly enough, Alderson later said, it was one of the greatest things that ever happened to Wilmer. He will be remembered in Mets lore forever, especially after he cranked a walk-off home run only a few days after the trade fell apart.
Hammer back near the wall. It's out of here! He did it! Flores! And the man who was supposed to be gone, well, the ball was gone.
Stopping this trade worked out great for the Mets, and so did the termination of a trade in 2000 that would have seen Albert Pujols starting his career in Montreal instead of St. Louis. In December of 2000, the Cardinals worked out a trade with the Montreal Expos that sent Fernando Tatis Sr. and Brett Reams to Montreal in exchange for pitchers Dustin Hermanson and Steve Klein. However, things easily could have gone differently. Tatis, just a year ago, had hit 34 home runs and 107 RBIs, and St. Louis had strongly considered having Pujols pack his bags instead. At the time, Pujols had posted a .314 average with 19 homers and 96 RBIs across 3 minor league levels, earning him Cardinals Minor League Player of the Year honors. And although he was viewed as a fantastic third base prospect, manager Tony La Russa reportedly believed Pujols and Tatis couldn't coexist long term. Ultimately, St. Louis stuck with the machine, and in 2001, Pujols rewarded them by hitting .329 with 37 home runs, 130 RBIs, and a 7.2 WAR as a rookie. But things could have gone very differently. If we had dealt Albert, I'm not sure this franchise looks anything like it does today, one Cardinals executive later reflected. Meanwhile, Tatis played just 41 games for the Expos that year, hitting .238 with a negative .8 WAR. The Cardinals must look back at the way this trade shook out with extreme joy. But the same cannot be said for the Marlins, who foolishly shot down a 2006 trade for the legendary Justin Verlander. At the end of 2006, the Florida Marlins stood at a pivotal crossroads. Hold on to a fading ace in Dontrelle Willis, or cash in for a future they couldn't yet see. Just a year removed from a second-place finish in the Cy Young vote, Dontrelle Willis was still seen as the charismatic cornerstone of the franchise, having posted a 2.63 ERA, 22 wins, and 6.8 WAR during his historic 2005 season. Even after regressing to a still respectable 3.87 ERA in 2006, the Marlins reportedly turned down an offer from the Detroit Tigers, which included Curtis Granderson and a then unproven prospect in Justin Verlander. Verlander, at the time, had just debuted with Detroit, going 17-9 with a 3.63 ERA and winning the AL Rookie of the Year. The Marlins believed Willis still had more elite years ahead, but he unfortunately did not. By 2007, he posted a 5.17 ERA, and within a few seasons, he was out of baseball entirely. Verlander, on the other hand, would go on to win an MVP, 3 Cy Youngs, throw 3 no-hitters, and strike out over 3,300 batters. As Ozzie Guillen once said of Willis's peak, for 2 or 3 months, he was unhittable. Unfortunately, the rest of his career never caught that train again, and the Marlins' refusal to sell high might be one of the biggest what-ifs in their team's history.
Miguel Cabrera remains sidelined with an injured hamstring, and yet he is still one of the most talked about people in baseball these days.
In 2007, the St. Louis Cardinals flirted with the idea of creating the most terrifying 1-2 punch of right-handed hitters the modern era had ever seen: Albert Pujols and Miguel Cabrera. At the time, Cabrera was just 24, but had already made 4 consecutive All-Star teams, slugged 138 career home runs, and driven in 523 runs. The Marlins were listening to offers, and the Cardinals, rich in prospects but thin on offense outside of Pujols, reportedly considered parting with outfielder Colby Rasmus and lefty Jaime Garcia to land him. Rasmus was the crown jewel of their farm system, a 5-tool talent ranked number 5 overall by Baseball America. Garcia, meanwhile, would go on to post a 3.57 ERA across 8 years in St. Louis. But Miguel Cabrera, he went to Detroit instead, where he racked up 2 MVPs, a Triple Crown, and 3,174 hits. If we had pulled the trigger, we could have had Pujols and Cabrera hitting back-to-back for nearly a decade, one former team official mused. Then again, no Rasmus and Garcia trade means no Matt Holliday in 2009 and no Edwin Jackson in 2011, moves that helped the Cardinals win the World Series. So sure, maybe St. Louis missed out on one of the greatest hitters of all time, but they might have accidentally kept a ring because of it. However, this what-if trade appears meaningless compared to a seismic trade offer in the 1940s, which almost saw a straight-up swap of Joe DiMaggio and Ted Williams.
Ted was ready for the greatest baseball year of his life, 1941, a year that would forever link him with another baseball icon.
During a boozy dinner at Toots Shores in New York, Red Sox owner Tom Yawkey and Yankees owner Dan Topping supposedly agreed, at least in spirit, to swap Ted Williams for Joe DiMaggio. That's right, the splendid splinter for the Yankee Clipper. According to legend, the deal was practically done until Yawkey sobered up and asked for a little extra: a promising young catcher who went by the name Yogi Berra. That was the deal breaker. Statistically, this would have been a trade of titans. DiMaggio had led the Yankees to 9 World Series titles and owned a career slash line of .325, .398, and .579 by the end of 1946. Williams, he was just 28 and already a 2-time MVP, with a .356 lifetime average, including an iconic .406 batting average season in 1941. DiMaggio was a super hitter, Williams once said. Gee whiz, I mean a super hitter. The idea of DiMaggio launching line drives off Fenway's Green Monster or Williams peppering Yankee Stadium's short porch and right is tantalizing, but it was never meant to be. Whether it was pride, Berra, or hangover-induced regret, the trade died the next morning, and as columnist Dave Anderson put it, Ted Williams belonged in Boston and Joe DiMaggio belonged in New York. The world stayed right that day, just like it did in 2009 when Felix Hernandez, a man who despite being offered 5 prospects from the Red Sox, decided to stay in Seattle as a Mariner where he belonged. This wasn't a standard trade offer though, because the Red Sox offered the Mariners a king's ransom for Felix. The offer wasn't just 5 players. They offered the Mariners the once-in-a-lifetime chance to handpick any 5 players they wanted from an even longer list of 8 prospects. Who was on the table? Clay Buchholz, Daniel Bard, Justin Masterson, Nick Hagedorn, Michael Bowden, Felix Dobront, Josh Reddick, and Yamaiko Navarra. That's a collection of power arms, solid starters, and toolsy outfielders, all for 23-year-old Felix Hernandez. The Mariners, however, said no. They weren't just declining future value, they were betting that Felix would become a franchise icon. And he did. From 2009 to 2014, Hernandez posted a 2.83 ERA with over 1,400 strikeouts and a Cy Young Award, becoming the undisputed ace of Seattle. Boston didn't take no for an answer though. They concocted a 3-way trade proposal that would have sent Adrian Gonzalez to the Mariners, Hernandez to Boston, and various prospects to San Diego, which the Mariners also rejected. While Seattle kept their king, one could argue it never really worked out for them because they couldn't give him a kingdom worthy of his crown. However, if you want to hear about other horrible trades that actually went through, ones that ruined franchises far more than this, watch our video on the 10 worst trades in MLB history to hear all the details.